And welcome to another episode of The Lifting. In this particular episode, it's another disclosure in the media. We haven't done one of these in a very long time. This one is about the lore of the Elder Scrolls game series. And here we have Ryan Plunkarts with us today. Say hi, Ryan.
Hi.
Yeah, and he's going to be talking about the Elder Scrolls lore, and I'm going to compare it to galactic history. So, Ryan, do you want to begin?
Yeah, so The Elder Scrolls is a fantasy game that takes place in a world, well, on a continent called Tamriel, which is inside their elven language, means dawn's beauty. And it also translates in the dragons of that universe's words to Dazugan, which means the exact same thing. And there's a lot of stuff in those games that when you look into galactic history is true. So we're just going to run through some of the races and stuff first to kind of like equate them to what are real races, because like the reptilians and the Lyrans and a few other races have equivalents there.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, because I've noticed by playing even just Skyrim alone, I've noticed historical similarities or just regurgitations of some of the same galactic history, even in just Skyrim alone. So this should be very fascinating. Ryan, go ahead.
So the first major race that is shown to you is that you'll like definitely equate with a distinct alien race would be the Argonians. They distinctly like resemble the like worker Draco that are like about human sized and green from what
Hmm.
I and they're not as they're depicted as not like evil like the Draco are, but they definitely take inspiration from them.
Oh yeah, most definitely. There's also another slave race of reptilians called reptoids as well that are actually more in line on an evolutionary scale with humans at the moment that were actually suppressed by the Draco a long time ago as well. They were a different race that were created by the Dark Anunnaki, and what happened is they broke free from that and became their own species. They look exactly like the Argonians. There's also another reptilian race that was created. They call themselves the Bluet. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. They're like this blue skin reptilian. They don't look anything like the Argonians, but they have the same evolutionary schism as well.
Well, something interesting about the Argonians that's in the lore is they actually serve a higher god. They serve something called the Hist, which are these sentient trees.
Okay.
And when they're like children, they drink this sap, and then it gives them like a telepathic communication back and forth with the tree. And so they pretty much like live out, and like their body size is depict like chosen by these trees, which I feel like these trees have also been known to be like extremely like sinister beings
Okay.
that like worship chaos and things.
Okay.
And I feel like these trees, even though they're like trees and it's not like trees are normally a good thing, I think these are meant to like fit into being like the harvesters that like the Draco serve.
Yeah, exactly. The Dark Anunnaki did create dark plant creatures and also mimic dark plant creatures on a lot of occasions. Actually, they'll mimic elementals. Mimicker demons will mimic elementals quite a bit, and also require worshippers and priests, like reptilian priests, to help feed the energy to them, just like with the church. In some cases, you have the dark AI that created the geometry by which the energy harvesting device was created. Then you have the reptilian servant that prays to them. They, like I said, they've been known to take the form of dark plant creatures and fairies and stuff like that to be able to draw people in to be able to get energy from them.
Well, it goes even as far as to say these trees give the Argonians their soul.
Yeah, there is a link that way between the Draco and the Harvesters because the Draco are completely dependent on AI, and they have basically a soul of AI nanites that help them draw in the energy from people, and that constant telepathic link and energetic entanglement link between the Anunnaki and the Draco always exists like a parasitic relationship. So that there's some of your galactic history right there.
That's there, and then they also I don't know if the Draco like have this style motif, but their style motif in their homeland at least is highly based off of like South American tribes.
That actually makes also sense. Some of the Argonians in the series look like some of the without the feathering, of course. They have that fuzzy like bearded dragon look in some
Yeah.
instances. And there are feathered serpents like in also Mexico and South America and everything. And those were also priests that would sacrifice people, not only gain the energy from them, but deliver it to their gods as well, that they thought were of the earth and the sky. So that actually makes a lot of sense. There's another link to that.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna move over and talk about the Khajiit now, which they're a cat race that have the ability to, depending on what phase of the moon they're born under, can change look. So some can look very human with just cat features, where some just look like a anthropomorphic cat person, and then others can be like the size of like a tiger and like be like a four-legged cat, or some can be like a house cat. But they all have the same intelligence and like ability like to like comprehend things as each other.
That's actually quite interesting that these different forms occurred. Like with the Lyrans, I know have a full cat human like feature. There are some that look like they would be more of an elemental that have some cat like features, but they have mostly human skin looking. Then you also have another cat lizard race known as the Khazad Thul, which is much more ancient than the Lyrans. They're the original ancestral line of the Lyrans. And I've seen some to stand on all fours and some to actually stand up. They're the ones that you see actually in front of temple doors, like the lions that are in front of the temple doors. And they're also lions are the grounding energy for Khazad-Thul consciousness. Actual lions that's why they've been targeted so heavily. And they come from a different planet that's like a universal nexus, like Earth. It was a planet that was conquered ages ago by the Dark Orions or Dark Anunnaki. They also blew that planet up along with Lyra back in that time frame as well. So all those forms you're talking about are either forms of Lyrans or their ancestral lineage.
Yeah, actually got my Khazad Thul edifice right here. But yeah, the Khajiit are also known to have like a spiritual leader that they follow called the Main, and this leader is the most lion-like of them. Like literally, this leader can only happen like once every 100 years, and it's when one's born. It's like the day after the next one died. The previous one died, and they like come out as babies with like a full-fledged like lion's mane already, and then like over their lifetime, Khajiit that come to like pay their respect to this spiritual leader will give them some of their fur, and it will like intertwine it into its mane, and then it'll use that to like help ground the entire race into like positivity, even though they're outside of their homeland. They're known as kind of like shifty beings that like they're known to like smuggle things and stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. Cat beings, have been given a very bad reputation by the Dark Orions. They've held humans out throughout history. They were one of the targeted races. They've also had bad. They've had bad counterparts too. There's some shifty versions of them that live in the Southwest that actually cast spells and curses on people as well. They're Black Panther looking ones. But the big main like one like you're talking about, that's also a Khazad-Thul royalty. They actually have the large mane like that, and they actually can morph from energy to matter. And those are more of the higher royalty first wave types. So that actually fits.
They all, and then like part of like the whole like hate against them is they make very good thieves in the game because of their feline like abilities and stuff. And in the game series, at least, it's shown that like they're thieves and they smuggled like drugs, but like it's a game, and apparently it's like sugar, but
Moon sugar, yeah.
Moon sugar I feel like is just like a straight up equation for like white sugar here.
Yeah, yeah, I believe that that's what they were talking about. At first, I thought they were talking about crack, but it was like,
Well,
yeah, it's like
yeah.
crack, but also regular sugar as well.
Well, yeah, because see, you can like eat it and you can drink it in Skyrim, but in the previous games, you could also like shoot it and like snort it.
Okay, then they're referring to crack, but they're also referring to the addictive qualities of
Yeah,
refined sugar as well.
yeah. It was like they were. They I think they took like multiple drugs and they were giving us ideas on one that we know is a drug, and then we're showing us that the other one is still a drug.
Yeah, they were equating one to the other, like there are additives in sugar that are also addictive. So they were calling it moon sugar, which that also equates to who actually added the addictive qualities to begin with. Nazis, moon, adding all the addictive qualities to what they consider lesser people. So
Yep.
that actually makes sense.
The moon sugar thing. The reason why I brought it up now is because the Khajiit are the ones that make it.
Hmm.
Usually, they're like they grow the crop that becomes like the skooma drug.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, that makes sense.
the Another race that we can get into are the Dunmer, the Dark Elves. Um, they actually weren't always these dark skinned, like gray skinned, red eyed elves.
Hmm.
They were once just like the High Elves, but they made a deal with some gods to worship those gods. Had some spiritual leader come in who kind of was like, no, let's not worship those gods because we can become immortal ourselves. Well, they still wanted to kind of control the people, so like this leader was like, we should still then like they had those gods had a champion, and he was like, no, let's not do that. But these other three killed him and used these tools on a heart of like what was like an ancient like it's explained really weird, but basically it's like the world's consciousness in the game.
Okay.
Um, they used it on the heart of the world that's like under a volcano, but they became immortal, super enlightened beings as a result of this. And the other gods, when the people decided to go with this group of like people that made themselves gods, the previous gods that had like protected them on their journey outside of their original home because of hate for their religion,
Hmm.
got mad and turned them into this dark race.
Okay. Yeah, that actually makes sense to some of the Syrian beings I've come across. There's some that have this teal like skin tone to them. Some of are blue gray color, and these are also you associate that with the Red Mountain, the volcano
Mm-hmm.
underneath Mount Shasta, and also this was also Mount St. Helens as well. There are beings under there that have a dark elf appearance that actually were the ones that blew up Mount St. Helens and caused all the disaster then. They're the ones perpetuating this whole big one earthquake that there's been this belief about for 20 plus 30 plus years. And they also are servants to what people would see as dark gods, or again the dark Anunnaki. Not all of them are, not all the tribes are, but there are these Syrian groups and also these I found out there was this word that one of them was explaining to me one time called, oh, I thought he was saying Albion, but it was, or like almost like avian, but it was Albion, meaning it was a form of demon in Scandinavian mythology. And so some of them have been demonized, so people think all Syrians bad or all Syrian tribes bad. But this equates to an actual group that actual sets of groups across the globe that look exactly like that are actually under different volcanoes and volcanic tubes that actually will cause these major eruptions and major earth disasters that
Well,
are actually happening. So that actually makes sense.
and what's interesting about them is their race inhabits a volcanic land. Well, volcanic and then like mushroom forests, but that's a that's another part of the game. They what they are known as is slavers. Their race heavily enslaves people because like not humans because they don't see them as useful in like where they live. They enslave to do labor in their homeland, but because their homeland is so harsh, they almost exclusively take slaves from the Argonian reptilian faction and the Khajiit like cat people faction.
Hmm.
as well as rarely they will even enslave like the Daedra, the demon-looking people, if they
Hmm.
can. But like it would be interesting to see if some of the Syrians are known as like slavers, because there are certain tribes with it, because even this dark elf group has like royal, not like noble families that are called like House Blank and House Blank, and they deal with certain things. And the
Hmm.
one is heavily known as like a slave importer.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Ancient Lemuria. Actually, this goes back to ancient Lemurian history. Just before the fall of Lemuria, there was a group of Syrians that took over as the royalty, and they viewed everybody else as beneath them and as slaves, or basically their staff, pretty much. And they were of a royal lineage. Were ones that had larger heads, and they had pink skin, pinkish blue, but these were the same basically blood as the rest of them. And this particular family got overthrown. When I look back on ancient Lemuria, I saw a bunch of native, Hawaiian-looking people overthrowing the Syrian royalty, and the rest of them ran towards the Marquesas, and then eventually Easter Island, where you have the big moai, and they were serving a winged being, which was said as a bird, but it was more like an Orion angelic type of being that was worshipped by not only some of the descendants of the natives that were there, that died off there, but these bigger headed Syrians. So yeah, they did keep slaves. They do. Some of them do see humans as lesser than themselves, and do engage in slave trading. So that is actually accurate.
And they culturally have like motifs almost like the Philippines and Southeast Asia in the game. Like if you're in Morrowind, that's where like a lot of their dress comes from.
That's actually, again, that's interesting because that was part of ancient Lemuria before the rest of it. Part of it took off as a ship, and the rest sunk. And Australia, also Southeast Asia, Philippines, and even a connection way up into Japan too. That was all part of Lemuria. Over here, Vancouver Island on this side, also known as Ape Island, because there were Sasquatch there as well. And also South America and Mexico, all of it, all those tribes went over here underground from that point. But yeah, to show that they had that same environment like the Philippines and Southeast Asia, that is actually a connection to ancient Lemuria.
Yeah, so they're a cool race. Another race that I think is cool because they clearly are representative of the Moldekians are the Admorans. So the Admorans are the ancestors to the Nords, which live in Skyrim, which is essentially like Scandinavia, and like Northern Europe. But they came from like across the sea, but originally they were like bigger and like even more brawn, and it's believed that one of the major story characters from like that you hear about in all the games, Tiber Septim or Talos Stormcrown was one of them when he was alive.
Hmm.
Um, and they're like the Nordic hero Ysgramor and his sons and the first companions were all of this Atmoran race. And I think and an interesting fact is that when they interbred with the elves in a place called High Rock, which is next to Skyrim, which I equate to like early medieval like Britain and France area. That's how it feels.
Hmm.
Um, they created a descendant lineage which had both, which reminds me kind of like the Nord, like the Viking pantheon guys,
Hmm.
and the Fae people coming together to create like the Tuathans.
Yeah, that actually is very accurate. I was just going to say that, where they merged with an elemental line, and they became what they are, the lines that they are today, different Tuathan races. This is why you can't always tell the difference between some Viking lineages and elemental lineages, because they merged so long ago. And that the fact that also they were larger before they became the Nords that you know of now, that would show giants and kind of downsizing when they merged with the elementals. Those giants also came from Hyperborea, and before that, Atlantis. Hyperborea and Atlantis essentially the same difference. And before that, of course, was Maldek, where they were much larger. The size differential between them and a regular human could be anywhere from it was like 12 to 15 feet. Some giants I even knew were even 30 feet or more. So and some of them that are underground are like that. Those were the beings that the Dark Anunnaki wanted to drown in the flood. Wanted to get rid of a descendant lineage that they thought was actually impure or not allowed, and that's why some of the giants hid underground. And of course, in the Bible, they depict them as the Nephilim, but then those were the lineage that preceded the Viking races from Atlantis, going over into the Scandinavian countries. This is why they have the Rh factor blood that some are looking for. Some of them, and some of the Spanish blood has some of the Rh factors. All of that area, they came over from Hyperborean Atlantis and coated basically that part of the land and interbred with locals that were there as well.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense because the Bretons are essentially just like a mix of these Viking guys and these they were a group of high elves essentially, which aren't all bad as the games like to portray in the later games, where where one high elf faction called the Thalmor in particular are clearly Orion based, where they don't want anyone believing anything that's not what they believe, because if you believe something they don't believe, they see it as a blasphemy, because their belief can only work to make them immortal, essentially. If everyone believes what they believe, they will transcend existence, is their belief.
Okay, yeah, that actually makes sense. That means they're getting more power from everyone else. They're like almost like an energy feeding. They just reworded it differently in that, and the fact that they were basically bucking creation in the whole storyline shows that's how the original Orions felt when they ripped across space-time. They're like, no, we want to survive basically the judgment of creation, and we're going to continue on living whether creation wants it or not. We're our own thing. We are creation, that sort of thing, And they went on to do that exact thing. We want everybody to believe the same thing. It's like the New World Order. We want everybody to look the same, act the same. This is why the Draco eventually enlisted the help of the Germans. They felt that they eventually created the Nazis, wanting everybody to look alike, act alike, believe alike. So that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because in the story they felt they were tricked, because they were like these every race in the story started out as these like primordial spirits that some stronger ones helped create the world, and then they entered the world as like to become the life of the world, and they didn't realize they couldn't leave once they came in.
Okay, that also makes sense too. Yeah, because
So
of the fact they created their own illusion and they got stuck within it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they started dying, and they were like diminishing in power, and they're like, we were tricked into coming in here. So they killed the guy that then became called Lorcan, who then that's the guy whose heart they used to be the other group used to become immortal.
Okay, yeah, that actually makes sense. Stealing that power back from those gods. Basically, what they're doing is you can actually take a set of soul shards that these beings have stolen from people, and it's almost like you are sticking a stake in their heart. It's like a vampire. You're sticking the stake in the heart, and with a vampire, you cut the head off. All of that energy goes back. Draco, it happens. Orion's, it happens too. But Orion's kind of melt into like a goo. But you have that energy. You can actually take that energy back and delegate it wherever you need it. So that actually makes sense the way they depicted that, because like a vampire with the stake in the heart. But many people forget that the end of Bram Stoker's Dracula, they actually burn Dracula and cut his head off. But that's how it is with vampires. That's how it is with Orion and Draco. But I've noticed with Draco and Orion's in particular, it's like in Highlander where they cut the head off and all the energy comes back out. That it's just exactly like that, where you're actually taking back the power that was actually stolen. So that actually makes a lot of sense how they depicted that. They depicted it in more of a lore type of way, and that makes sense.
They didn't really get their power back, but they felt like it was a proper punishment for their trick. But now they're trying to, if they believe that no one will worship Lorcan in any form that he takes, to them at least, so anything human, because Lorcan is kind of like very human in like or in like the humans view him as like their origin point.
Okay.
If anything Lorcan based isn't worshipped, they feel like they will be able to transcend existence essentially.
Yeah, and also human-based human sovereignty, humans choosing for themselves. If people aren't, basically they depict it as worshiping Lorcan or human origin. If they also humans are not finding out their own origin, the bad guys get more power. If they don't have the knowledge of where they originally came from, that actually makes sense. Lorcan also sounds like Loki as well. Sounds a lot like.
Yeah, he did trick these ancient gods into creating the world. He didn't do any of the weird stuff Loki did, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Loki was a Syrian being, by the way, too. He was
yeah,
more akin to a dark elf, or like they could depict him as part frost giant, but it's kind of similar. But the knowledge, it was basically symbolic there. What they were talking about, humans not being allowed to come into their own power and do what they wish.
yeah. In Lorcan also goes by a couple other names in the human pantheon, like the ancient Nordic pantheon in the games. He's Shor, and you actually visit Shor's Hall, which is essentially Valhalla of Tamriel's universe. You go there because it's like your birthright, and you have to go to destroy the World Eater, which actually will eat the world in the lore. He will come back and actually eat the world. That's why I don't get a soul from him when you defeat him.
Yeah, all the way.
He has a role to play, but he kind of got corrupted somewhere along the line and like decided he wanted to control. Whereas, and we're talking about a dragon here right now, which they did get corrupted in our timeline as well. Some of them.
Oh yeah, and that makes sense. A lot of them got corrupted by of course nanotech, and which would appear to be a sickness like the black goo, which Alduin appears to be. He has that sheer black color, like how the black goo would coat a being. He looks exactly like that. And interestingly enough, him, Paarthurnax, and Akatosh are basically Enki, Enlil, and Anu in the storyline. They just depicted them as dragons in the story.
And something interesting about the dragons in the story is they are immortal beings. They exist outside of time because they're Akatosh's children's, essentially. Which is Akatosh is a dragon god of time. He has one head that's dragon, one head that's man. And then like he's got a human body, but he's also got a dragon head. But he also can like turn into this big dragon spectral thing if he needs to. And his bloodline, he has had human kids, which is what the Dragonborns are in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And they generally ascend to become worshipped gods just due to their like worldly feats, not because they forced anybody to do it, but because their feats during their lifetimes were so great that like people just started worshiping them.
Okay, yeah, that actually makes sense. There, people revere dragons to this day, and it makes also sense that he had two faces because that's like the face of Saturn, where he's the Kronos, the god of time, where he looks to the past and the future. Also, it equates to royalty of the Khazad-dûl because what Dragonborn DNA would equate to, and dragons also are equated to Khazad-dûl, not just cat. They have dragon lineage as well, and essentially some of these cat beings have dragon descent lineage in a different form, just like birds can be reptiles as well. The Dragonborn DNA equates to what's known as Firebrand DNA. Our friend Aurora could explain that a little bit better, but those are some of the first wave type people or people that would affect change here. People that are linked to that energy, that time, that royalty. That actually makes a lot of sense. Whenever I hear Aurora say Firebrand DNA, I always think Dragonborn because they're exactly the same way that they're being depicted.
Yeah, the Dragonborns they take it a step further because they actually are essentially just a dragon in a human body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they can like learn the dragon speak easier and stuff. And dragons in the games, if two dragons are fighting, they're actually just having a debate. Where even though that you're seeing fire and ice and other effects happening, their words are like magically imbued. And so two dragons fighting, if one dies, it means one actually verbally debated the other one to death. In the lore, at least, that's what that means.
Yeah, that actually also makes sense, because when you utter a certain frequency, even if you're fighting or if you're just speaking, you're uttering a certain frequency, you're actually transforming the environment around you, and the more powerful torsion field in that case wins. Whether it's a debate, whether it's a fight, or anything like that, the more powerful torsion field wins, and then can actually defeat or consume the other. In how can I put it? Like if you're arguing with somebody and they're affected by the energy of your voice, and that goes back to the voice as well. They're affected by the energy of the voice. So if you're existing in that particular vibration, you can literally either conjure something with very easily with that voice. You can actually transform somebody else's energy with that voice. That's where some spells have their potency for the writer of the spell. Yeah, and say if you were, say, in the secret space program, this is another angle to this. If you were in the secret space program and you have a certain energy resonance from being out in the system, and you meet somebody else that also has this, you can actually trigger their memories by just speaking a fact about something that happened out there. You can actually utter a certain event, and if you've grounded that information into the benevolent earthly Akesh and the galactic Akeshas and all that, if you've grounded that information, you can actually trigger that person. So there is a truth to that. You could literally debate somebody to death if you wanted to with that energy. You could literally stop their heart, stop their brain functions, tell their cells to stop replicating, all of that. So you could literally do that.
Yeah, so that is a really cool point you're making, because the dragons can do that too. They can basically, the only way a dragon can die is if another dragon gets rid of them and absorbs their soul and then uses it as their own power. And that brings in another point that is in the lore, which might be helpful, which is called mantling. So certain intelligent life forms throughout the story can do this thing called mantling, where they emulate another being, even sometimes a god, to the point where they become indistinguishable to this god and meld in with them, which makes the argument of certain entities here that will replace people when they're taken.
Okay.
They have to I assume they are watching people before they take them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to learn their mannerisms, so that if entities or some kind of robot is put back, it can act like the person does. So that there is
I've
no
seen
question.
this many times where people have been actually replaced. I've actually witnessed this process before in people, where the original person, and then you get a facsimile of the person. And this is where people think it's reptilian shape-shifting, but it also, that happens as well. But then you have bug races that mimic humans. They can't get our humor quite right, so they mess up the language a little bit. Sometimes that's why they tend to choose people in foreign countries, because that would end up not speaking English correctly a little bit. That's why they usually choose that, because they can flub in the language and not be noticed. I've actually heard of reptilian agents taking the place of somebody, and they're more cold because they're not in their heart space. They're actually, the mannerisms aren't exactly perfect, but also you have mimicking demons that are actually made up of clusters of nanites that will actually repeat and mimic everything you're saying and thinking and doing, so that they can actually they're taking the power again of those words and transforming themselves, because they see you as a creator being, see. And they will absorb that and actually become just like you. Some people call that a doppelganger or a changeling. There are changelings that can actually do these things too. It's not as possible for them to do it anymore. There are some rare cases that it is happening, but Joanna and I won't name the person, but Joanna and I were a witness to this. When we were in North Carolina, there was somebody that she had been working around that went on a vacation and then came back, and they were a totally different person. Literally, they had a different core energy. They had everything was totally different. That person had been replaced in that same fashion.
Wolf. That sounds kind of scary to think about.
Yeah, so they were
Yeah.
depicting that correctly too.
Yeah, and even some people don't go as far as mantling, but like the first Elder Scrolls game is all about getting rid of this guy who has assumed the identity of the Emperor and has like the Emperor trapped in like a dimensional prison,
Okay.
and like re-establishing the rightful Emperor and his line, because this guy has tried to usurp the throne by basically just taking the image of the Emperor. Because
Okay.
he was like the Emperor's court mage who betrayed him, and then like basically played the part for like 10 years while you're on your quest to get the pieces of like a staff to like free the other Emperor, and then you go and fight him, and then the game's over.
That actually makes sense. You would literally have to keep the other person alive somewhere in a cage, exactly like what you were saying, or a quantum box of some sort. If you're this applies to different types of cloning as well, where in some cases you have to keep the original person alive in captivity, and you have to keep going back for the genes. That's not always true, but that has happened. That's why some genetic memory audits actually help to clear out cloning, because they're actually taking they've trapped you somewhere and you don't know a piece of you somewhere, and they're actually taking pieces of your energy and pieces of your genetic structure. But that is actually true also. That's how some of the lines in Japan got usurped by the Spindlies. They switched out some of their people. This is what happened in medieval Europe, the exact same process where they flipped out some leader and replaced him with somebody. And I've had visions recently of, I don't know if it's past lives of mine existing in that, where I was somebody in the background going, okay, you've committed this crime against your people, we're going to replace you. And I automatically see another duplicate of theirs walk in the room, and they're all in shock. And then that person took the place of somebody that was maybe cruel or barbaric towards their people, and then it ended up bringing peace. So there are good white hat people that do the same technique as well. I mean, it can cause its own set of problems, but that has happened on the white hat end of the spectrum too.
Yeah, that reminds me a decent bit of some of these beings called the Slode. They live off the continent of Tamriel, toward to the west. They live on an island in the ocean, but what they are is essentially they're giant like slug beings. They're known to be like semi-aquatic, so like half of their civilization's like in the ocean and half is on land, and they have flying ships. But what they're known to do is go into a place and enslave large populations, work them to death, keep part of their DNA, and then raise up like armies of undead beings to like serve them even in death.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because that's not only is that symbolic of people being replaced and becoming almost like an undead slave or worshiper of beings, but utilizing the DNA very much like the black goo does. The black goo will harvest DNA and bring up these goopy-looking versions of beings that it's actually usurped throughout history. I've actually seen this process where you'll see what you think is a reptilian or a dinosaur, and it's actually a representation of something that this goo millions of years ago has actually usurped and taken the form and used it as like an undead army. You could actually say that. So that there's two comparisons to that right there.
And they also are responsible for the creation of plagues.
Okay, that the Black Death was essentially the black goo. So
they're responsible for the creation of plagues, and they've also invaded Tamriel, never successfully, because there are not many of them in the games. Like, there's not many of them physically in the world. Basically due to infighting and the fact that their like birthing process is really messed up. Basically, like they're like you know how you hear about a shark where like the other sharks eat them before they can get out of like the mother, or like that's what they do. Only one gets to come out, and like 45 are born or something.
Oh wow. Okay.
And
Yeah. So
yeah,
yeah, I can see that being messed up because also by nature these different Orion factions fight amongst themselves, even kill their own. You know, there's these different clans that, and also the Cabal families. They will also kill the children of the one of any of the other clans. They'll use them as sacrifices. They'll do all of that. I mean, they do that to anybody, but I mean, they do that to each other too. They basically consume each other, and one could argue from a quote from another game series, Champions of Norath, hate by nature consumes itself. So that is actually, I know it's not the game series we were going for, but that's actually, that applies to this particular situation.
yeah. Even Star Wars says like you hate if you fall into hate, then you're just gonna keep falling because there's no point.
Yeah, and it's basically this. It's like the snake eating its own tail, sort of thing, and
Which is a
that's
common symbol in the Elder Scrolls. The Ouroboros is a common symbol in those games, um, especially in the most recent game, which is like an MMO version.
Mhm.
But it's basically three alliances that are just going around in circles, and the symbol is the animal like logos for the alliances, like eating each other's tails.
Okay, yeah,
And
because they're all hating each other and
yeah,
consuming each other. Yeah.
because it's symbolic of the fact that at the same time there's a demon invasion going on, and they're too busy fighting themselves to like stop this demon invasion, and then like your character during the main story stops the invasion and then can take part in the war.
Okay. Okay. Basically, your main character goes in and basically breaks up that energy cycle that's continuously going. This is what I always tell people about. Your torsion field is stronger. You can actually break these old cycles. So basically, they were saying you're the hero. You can come in and break these old patterns and these old cycles. That's the gist of what they were trying to tell the player. Basically, saying you have it within you to actually be better than these old patterns of hatred, old patterns of fighting. And I find that very very interesting. And there's a lot of things like in Skyrim alone that apply to nowadays, like abductions, for instance, or the yield, as you hear us talking about. You have Ulfric Stormcloak, who is essentially Stormcloak would be basically a word meaning false flag, or storming or cloaking the storm, what is really actually going on, because he was abducted by the Thalmor, reprogrammed and put back. That is actually an operative that was causing a for and against, and you have the Empire that yields to the Thalmor just to keep the peace and won't allow certain things to go forward. You know, so this actually makes a lot of sense in that respect
Yep.
too, nowadays especially.
Yep. Then that first story I was talking about goes even further because it starts with you losing your soul essentially. And the whole reason you're doing it is to get it back, right? But like over the course of it, you do all this good, and I feel like that's a like an idea about the whole falling, coming back up, and getting your life back as like a galactic being that's
Mhm.
enlightened.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Where basically you're regaining your soul or reconnection to source, you could say, and
Yeah.
becoming the galactic being, getting out of the repetitious cycle again, the false reincarnation grid, and coming back out as a galactic being. But also at the beginning of Elder Scrolls Online, the very first thing you do is you're escaping a soul trap, and you have to gain a soul shard to enter the world of the living again.
Yeah,
And essentially,
that's what I'm talking about. When you're in, right before you get into that prison, the cutscene before that is when they take your soul,
okay, yeah.
and as a result, you are like that's the end of the story is you beat this deity that has all the souls, and then they get returned back to their person. Like when you release soul shards from like a spindly or like a big Draco that has had like a ton of them, and they go back to their rightful person. They're
Mhm.
like whizzing around, and then they go back.
Yeah, yeah, that's essentially what happens. Also, I found these places in different layers called soul repositories as well. Like I found them in different planes of existence, like plasma and energy and magnetics and all this other stuff. And also code repositories where different codes are being kept. And I've gone in and actually found demons that are actually guarding these little. They could be no bigger than a coin, and you can actually go down in there, and they could be this big, and they could be even a little orb that's flying around near you, and they could have these souls trapped in there. Well, you release all those, they go back to their rightful owners, no matter how long ago they were taken, no matter where this being is and in what form, they go back to the original owner.
Yeah. So that's just like a good point that as we lead into the Daedra part of this. So the Daedra are these spirits that didn't help create the world, and during different mock-ups of like seeing the universe structure of the world, they kind of like are on these planes of existence that are on like a ring outside of like the planetary structure that the rest of the games take place in these places called the Realms of Oblivion, which, from what I've gathered, are dimensional pockets all in the same place, but vibrating at different frequencies, controlled by an overbeing, which is this Daedric prince, that have servants, or some don't even have servants, they don't want them, so they don't have them, called just Daedramora, Daedroths, different types of Daedra. There's different types, like Watchers, which are these like big, like floating eyeballs with tentacles.
Okay.
And then there's like Daedroths, which are they're what I equate to if you took like if like the reptilians made some kind of abomination in their image. They're kind of like a huge, stocky, bipedal crocodile that can breathe fire.
Yeah, I've actually seen something similar where there are servant reptilians that are short and stocky. Some of them are small that have wings. And I've also seen the floating eyeballs with tentacles too. That's Orion-based technology, where some of them have like this organic look to them. And those are basically the eyes and ears of some of them. Where they can actually float into people's houses. That goes back to the orbs I was talking about, where they could go around in people's houses. Those actually are little ships. But these eyeballs, this morning, I've been badgered this morning before getting this information out, because I didn't want us to compare all of this together, to show people they already knew the history. It was already right in front of them. This is a form of disclosure that was been put in front of them, and the fact that the Daedra live in those different pockets of oblivion. Some say that Enki had his own like false heaven in some of the histories, where he could exist in his own heaven. And other beings I've actually bilocated into different areas where they're what I call negative 0 points, where it's like a reverse polarity of the environment around it. Therefore, it's creating its own little pocket universe. And there are beings in these little pockets that sit on chairs and ground this pocket into existence. They keep it in existence, and they'll absorb the worship energy of beings. I believe Mecca has one of these places in history. I don't want any hate mail from what I just said, guys, but I believe there's a chunk of black goo in the center of the Hajj that's there, that has this. Shiva created. I found out, despite what the history says, I found out Shiva created this. I found out there was one of these pockets in Egypt where the original invasion took place of the harvesters took place in Egypt. And there are these different pockets that people have fallen into. And they actually, some of them can even form a ring around the planet. I've actually seen some of these pockets form a ring and layers. There are 5 different layers that I've seen that absorb different types of energy that all get funneled through the etheric plane and some of the plasma and magnetic realms. So yeah, there are these different planes that are just like the different planes of Oblivion. So they actually got that accurate.
Yeah, and the different planes of Oblivion, a lot of them have different like landscapes and stuff too. They're not all just like the main one that most people would know from playing the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion is like a lava field with like these black spires. But there's also Cold Harbor, which is the Daedric Prince Molag Bal's homeland. And his is actually a carbon copy of Tamriel, as if he was in domination of the entire thing.
Okay, yeah, that shows it as like a parallel copy of our dimension. Some people say the spirit world is like that here too, but these false heavens and these false realms actually can be carbon copies of different places. Like I ran into one that a being that was running it, very much like a Daedra would run their realm, made it look like an insane asylum that was capturing people's energies within cages and stuff like that. I found that one. There was another one that was called Sigatoris. That one was absorbing hate and fear energy from people, and it looked exactly how people would expect hell to look like. There was a, I'm trying to remember there was another one that had nothing but sexual energy taken, and it had nothing but depictions of mountains, ice, and different. Not, I don't want to say fire, but it had depictions of like blue ice and mountains, and had a big spiral tower. I've run into that. So the writers of this game series had that dead to rights. People don't realize how much dead to rights that these writers and people had this.
And to go even further, the whole Daedric invasion during the Elder Scrolls Online
Mm-hmm.
is those anchors that like open that you have to take down people.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point of those, they're not just portals. What they're really doing is they're actually pulling the world of like the living actual people
Mm-hmm.
into this dimension, or that's if they all came down at once and like worked, what they'd be doing is pulling the world into that dimension
Mm-hmm.
so that he can really have the world under his control.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where they would literally try to swap out dimensions, because see, they're confined to a smaller, basically, compartment. If they could swap that out and get enough worshippers to give them enough power, in reality, they could actually swap that out if enough people gave them enough energy. That's not going to happen that way now, but that's another way they were depicting, like kind of like basically just pulling on the corners of a sheet and then folding it and inverting it. That's basically what they're doing, is a reverse wormhole, and they're just pulling it out and transforming the world around so that they could exist here and have domination. That's also why they wanted nuclear conflict, because they require being around large amounts of radioactivity. So they could walk freely on the earth. That's another way they would need to invert. That's why Chernobyl happened. That was a rogue Syrian group that did that, that aided with that. And that's why you have these nuclear disasters, because then they can have pockets, basically like how you have a saltwater fish in a tank. They could literally drift away from their pocket realm and walk freely within a certain zone. So that actually makes sense. Again, it's a depiction of the same thing.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Anki's pocket dimension that he had.
Mm-hmm.
One of the servants of one of these Daedric princes in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, his name's Mankar Camoran, and he's basically like the high priest of one who like gets everybody else that like is in his cult to like worship this god by like releasing a book series that is why you should worship him and his demands and what he'll give you. Well, he was given Mankar Camoran's paradise, a pocket of the pocket dimension,
Mm-hmm.
that for him and the god was a paradise. It was like a peaceful little like country estate on like these floating islands with like a gold all the time around. And if he snapped, it could go nighttime so he could sleep and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone else went there, it was like a hellscape. And he lived in like a cave. And it basically, it wasn't real, and it was a perception filter given to Mankar Camoran,
Mm-hmm.
so that he thought he had something nice, but he didn't.
Yeah, and it was really, yeah, that's another form of deception. Evil always uses beauty to deceive people. There's all, and then they use layer upon layer of holograms of people that they've been tricking people with. We always say it's layer upon layer upon layer of deception that's being collapsed by the new energies that are coming around. Also, if you enter another dimensional pocket, if you're of a certain vibration, this applies to good dimensions as well. You'll actually, depending on what you're anchored to, will actually transform the environment around. That's why some higher dimensional beings don't want us in their realms or bilocating, because we can literally have an entanglement effect on their realm to here, and vice versa. They could get messed up, and that flow could mess us up as well. We could literally see, if we went into a higher dimension right now, we would see the landscape change immediately depending on what we carried with us energetically. That's another form of it. But the version you were speaking about was basically the illusion, basically holographic illusion layer upon layer.
Yeah. So, do you have any other topics that you think might be beneficial to talk about?
Let me see here. We could always I could always bring a galactic in, and then we could cap it off with that. I had actually wanted to bring in a being or a benevolent being that could actually speak on why this was being presented in this way. It's 100% factual, even though there are fictional characters being depicted here. Let me see here. I'll see who wants to come through to actually speak about this. I know there was a huge amount of opposition to even touching base on this today. You know, even in the small, I know the Elder Scrolls as this mass amount of information. We'll probably have to do a second show based on this on a different part of the topic. Like we could focus on each game's
Like
storyline.
story.
Yeah, the story of each game and why things were happening the way they're happening, because there's so much information to cram into an hour.
Oh, yeah, and like each game alone can take like a month to get through.
Oh yeah, and yeah, even Fallout, any of those games,
Yeah.
it would take a month to get through all of it. So okay, yeah, I can feel some benevolent beings here. Let me see here. All right, we could just do the standard question and answer too. I think that would be more applicable to.
I have a distinct question, and I've heard someone I know who has channeled beings in the past, but I don't know how reputable this person is, said that was a real world. Like that's a real universe, like in the multiverse, that really is a real place.
Yeah, there was a planet at one time. This was destroyed during some of the SSP times, or harvested, I should say. There was a place called Lystaria, and it was very, very reminiscent of Tamriel. It was damn near exact. And it was a planet, I don't know how far away from us it was. And it got ravaged by war after war after war. And I honestly don't know if there's anybody left there at the moment. But it was so very, very similar. I can corroborate at least part of that. I don't know if all of that is true. I just know there was something very, very similar. It went from magic and sword and sorcery to high technology, and then I don't know of any more past that. But it was actually interesting. So I'll see if I can bring in. Oh, Isaac, really? You want to be the one to talk to? Okay. Yeah, I got him right here on my desk here. So,
up, Isaac. This is my first real talk with Isaac.
Yeah.
There were other beings popping in. So, I mean, first question is then: is it a multiversal dimension where everything that happened in the games is real?
Okay. Let's see. Oh, you just want to talk to him directly? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, you can come in. Yes, indeed. Everything you are seeing within the realms of the Elder Scrolls, the entire breadth of it, is either a metaphoric depiction of reality or is reality itself. The names that are used within the games, and there are far too many to list all of them here. However, the names that are used are either allegorical renditions of events that have happened through Earth history, or they happened in a parallel dimension, or they happened within galactic history. The very same thing happened within your sci-fi realm, such as Star Wars and Star Trek. But within this particular medium, the Elder Scrolls, everything that you see there has its basis in reality, in either an allegorical respect and or a literal respect, including races, including architecture, depictions of what people look like, all of these things, landscapes, beings, everything, including the planetoids in the sky above, in the nighttime scenes in Tamriel, in the solar system, when Maldek was still in the sky. All the planets looked exactly like that in the skies of Maldek, or what you would call ancient Asgard, or the kingdom of Asgardian gods. Some of what's being depicted are elements of Maldek itself, especially some of the elements of the different realms and the different depictions of the sky and the structures and the beings. All of what you mentioned is, I can honestly say, 100% true. Now, some people have twisted and contorted this information, you see, and have twisted, contorted it into different fictional aspects that do not belong to that particular story set, but they are still depictions of reality in some fashion. So what you are actually looking at, very much like the depictions of the Anunnaki of old, and also all depictions of different alien races, people were literally depicting what they were looking at. Think of the Elder Scrolls games in exactly the same fashion. They are literally depicting what things look like. And there is actually more than one world that looks like this. This is why he has depicted that as more of an alien world, because even in the story it's supposed to be more like Earth. But I will tell you this, there are a couple of planets that are in that same stage of development, myth, magic, and dimensional travel, let's just say, that are actually in that particular stage of development. I know this sounds vague, so I will go even further into this. How the whole structure of Tamriel is depicted in the game, right down to the way the continents are laid out and the way the history has been depicted. You are looking at an accuracy that is at least 85 to 90% accurate. The reason there is a 15 to 10% gap in there is because different names are being used for the species. Different, somewhat similar depictions are being used in some species. And they are using fictional god names and fictional place names. That is the only difference in this particular series and in the basis of reality. It is also in a different wavelength. You would call it 5D. So in this, there are at least 2 planets that you are actually bringing information in from. And I do mean the creators of this and yourselves, and other writers that write similar things. They are bringing in information from 2 planets that are in existence, and you are asking also if they are in the same solar system. Indeed, they are. I cannot tell where this solar system is currently because a certain entanglement would be formed going in the reverse direction, and this would be bad for that particular place. But in this, it is in a 5D wavelength, and it is what you would call a metropolis of magic and sorcery and information. You would also call that a nexus point that eventually Earth will be fully connected to, because Earth too is a nexus point. This is why the histories are so similar. This is why people are writing these things. And it is also based on your actual already written history as well. You merge all of these things together and you have a 100% map of information. Thank you.
Okay. And the other major question that is kind of in that has to do with this is these games, are the writers direct SSP people that get to see these type of things, or are they just giving it through downloads they don't know they're receiving?
It is actually elements of the two, you see. There are channelers that bring it in, but those very channelers are also people that have been in the SSP. They are getting it from their own memories, and it is also stored in Sacred Akashic. So you're actually getting it from both angles.
Okay. Do you have anything you would like to add to this discussion?
Indeed. In the depictions of the Elder Scrolls, all of these different races that you are seeing within this, all of these different story elements, as I've said, are true. But there are also beings that are directing their own histories at you in the hopes that Earth will as you would say, ascend back into the 5D realms of existence, you see. These two worlds in which I spoke of were intricately connected in with ancient Maldek and all of what you would call the 9 realms, or the worlds encircling the world, you see. This also is depicted as the false incarnation grid encircling the world, which is the false negative 0 points in which you spoke of. So these things all exist. These things are now grounded in the realms of your Keshic, benevolent Keshic informations of both galactic and earthly realms. And also, I wish to tell everyone watching this that in your own histories and in your own minds and in your own hearts, you are coming up with these same things in your hearts and in your minds and in your souls. But you are afraid of either ridicule, or you are afraid you are going crazy. You think, oh, I must have played that game too many times. Oh, somebody told me I've seen this movie one too many times. No. You are actually seeing real information. This is why you, Ryan, have dedicated this portion of your existence to actually retaining this information, because you have actually been in these locations physically yourself as Ryan, and also as a soul out there in creation. You are bringing in this stream of information. You are actually connecting to it. It is not just playing a game too much or reading too much into the lore. You're all of you listening are actually being drawn to this for a reason. This is why you get into the games. This is why you get into cosplay. This is why you depict yourself as a certain way, because you are depicting you. You are becoming more you. Therefore, you are bringing this information regardless of what anyone else says. They are on their own path. You are on your own, and you are bringing in this information of where you have been and are connected to. This is what I came in to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah, no wonder there was such a huge opposition to this morning. There was just this massive wave of just pounding, because they didn't want anybody bridging this connection, and also that message at the end too. People are just depicting themselves, like in Comic-Con or places that they cosplay or become different things. They're connecting the things that are similar to who they came from and who they've been around. So it's actually very, very interesting. I'm actually glad we did this, because the reason I've been wanting to do this for a while was to compare all of these different details. We'll have to go more in depth into it in later shows. So I believe we can actually end the show here. Ryan, if you have anything else to add before we do that?
Yeah, just everybody have a great time out there and keep working so that we can get out of the dichotomy that we're in and into better energies. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great day, everybody. This has been an episode of the Lifting Disclosure in the Media. Thank you, everybody, for watching.